So, good morning, everyone. Today I will be presenting about service dominant design, a digital ideation method from the chapter 8 of Architecting the Digital Transformation by Zimmermann, Schmidt, and Jane. So, just to give an outline, it's pretty short, just an introduction and service dominant logic, service dominant design, and conclusion. So I'll also start with digital transformation. So everybody knows that it's today's dominant business transformation, and it has a strong influence on how digital services and products are designed in a service dominant way. So there is a popular underlying theory of value creation and economics exchange known as service dominant or SD logic. However, SD logic is abstract. It's just a theory and cannot be used directly by the companies as instrument for business model and innovation and design. So this study is proposing to address this issue, and it provides service dominant design provides guide for companies in transitioning to a service and value oriented strategy. So by the end of this presentation, I hope that we all have a better understanding of the service dominant logic and the service dominant design as presented in this chapter. So let me begin with the Industrial Revolution. So during the Industrial Revolution, economics exchange was more concerned with tangible manufactured goods, yung mga ginagawa talaga ng mga manufacturing companies. And it comes with the utilization of labor and maximizing productivity and output. And creating value was regarded as an isolated process. Hindi kailangan, it doesn't need the input of consumers. And because of this, manufacturers occupy the dominant position in the economic exchange. So, in contrast, in today's global economy, value is defined as being experientially perceived and co-created with with the consumers. Tangible products are enriched with intangible services. And companies are starting to shift to being service providers as well. So hindi na lang sila, they're not just manufacturing goods. It also has to be accompanied by service, or the company should deliver just the service. So because of information technology, it enables new business models where consumers are actively involved in the value creation, economics exchange, and the dialogue is dominated by the consumers who are the beneficiary of the service. So now the power shifts to the consumers because they are the ones who create the value for the business. And so because of this, because of this change in perspective, the businesses are disrupted by innovative digital competitors if hindi nila kayang sabayan. And the need to transform into a digital enterprise is very important now. And they are forced, even though they are not ready, especially now during the pandemic, di ba? We know some of the companies are parang they are forced to become digital because everyone is going digital now, especially we're not going out and stuff like that. And so because of that, syempre, the purpose of this study is to provide an approach called the service dominant design, which is a structure. It provides and it helps to identify and create a structure to plan the digital transformation in a simplified and practical way. So now, service dominant design is based on service dominant or SD logic. Now you may ask, what is service dominant or SD logic? So that is where we will begin the discussion. So first, let us define service in the context of SD logic. It is defined as the application of specialized competencies, knowledge, and skills through deeds, processes, and performances for the benefit of another entity or the entity itself. So, in this way, service dominant logic is a theory proposed in 2004 by Stephen Vargo and Robert Lush in the article Evolving to a New Dominant Logic for Marketing. It is an emerging dominant logic that focuses on intangible resources, the co creation of value, and close business relationships. Now, SD Logic's understanding of economics is that service is favored over traditional manufactured goods in this economy, in today's global economy. So, in order to explain this further, I'd like to compare the goods dominant logic and the service dominant logic. So, in goods dominant or GD logic, value is embedded into the product during manufacturing, and the process of which is called value in exchange. So, when the product is created itself, that is where they define the value of the product. Now, on the other hand, in SD logic, value is co-created together with the consumer. So it's not just the product itself, but it has to have the feedback from the consumer. Value is derived from the benefit that is achieved by the consumption of a specific service, which is called the value in context. So this supports the statement in today's global economy, dominant position of economics exchange is on the side of the consumer. This shift from the GD logic to SD logic also moves the company from the question, what can we do for you, to what can you do with us? So a good example of this is Apple. We know that Apple sells iPhones, which are the goods or the product element of the company. However, the service element of this is iTunes or app stores, which is highly profitable for Apple and is the main revenue and profit generator. So, another example in terms of digitalization is in banks, even in local banks like BPI, BDO. One of their product element is savings account. But we don't just avail their product, the savings account, just because of the product itself, but because of the services the bank provides, like online banking, online transfers, yung mobile apps, and a good and stable mobile app. It just can't be, I don't know if you've experienced it, but some banks are not always, it's not very reliable. Sometimes it's always down, there's always maintenance, and it's slow. So it's also factors in on the value of the service. So same goes with other traditional banks or digital banks. So instead of just answering, what can we do for you? Or we find ways from BDO or something like that. So they should also be able to answer the question, what can you do with us? Oops, sorry. So going to service dominant design. So the goals of the service dominant design or SDD is to ask the right questions and to emphasize considering service and value oriented over plain digitalization. So the unified approach for it is a unified approach for identifying a company's desirable digital services and business models that directly correspond to co-creating superior stakeholder value. So there are four components of ideation framework. First is corporate identity, stakeholder network, value proposition, and then finally the business model. Now I will discuss all four briefly, and then after we have an example in that was given in the chapter. Okay, so first of all is corporate identity. So it is a mix of elements which gives organization their distinctiveness. Service and value orientation mindset must be integrated to this purpose. So in the definition of the corporate identity itself, value should already be instilled or given thought from in the corporate identity step pa lang. So the goal is to have a personalized co-creation experience that are truly unique to everyone. So the deliverables for this component is overall practices. And from here, we can ask the auxiliary questions. What is the overall company philosophy? What is the essence from a service center perspective? Which practices need to be enacted to enable service centricity on a corporate level? So second is stakeholder network. So this is the where and how it is positioned within its service ecosystem. So the stakeholders are identified and classified and analyzed with respect to the individual pains and gains. So the question is, how is it creating value? So the deliverables in this component is stakeholder network diagram and stakeholder profiles. So the auxiliary questions are, who are the strategic customer stakeholders and non-customer stakeholders? So you take note that they are also considering non-customer stakeholders because they are also involved in creating the value of the service. So how might they interact with each other? So it's not just the individual stakeholders itself, but the relationship between the stakeholders. And how can they be classified, and what are their individual life projects and goals that could be addressed? So the third component is value proposition. So this is used to define how to address each stakeholder's individual pains and gains, visualized using the value map of the value proposition canvas. Now we will have an example of this later on, and it's actually a diagram of which defines the stakeholders and their pains and gains. And so the question here is how a company is delivering the value. So the deliverables for this is overall value proposition and the value maps. So the auxiliary questions are, which value proposition would best fit to each stakeholder's pains and gains? What is needed to co-create superior value in context? So the fourth is business model. So this is used to identify and define the realizations of these value propositions in suitable business models. What a company is doing to create value, and each business model corresponds to one value proposition and contains everything that is needed to deliver the proposed value. So the deliverables for this is the business model canvases. Um, for those who also take up the what do you call this, advanced system design implementation, one of the points that were discussed in the last lecture was the business model. So this is also that is also an example of what will be the output for this component or for this service dominant design. So the auxiliary questions are, how are stakeholder relationship managed? Which tools and processes are in use to enable information sharing and contextual knowledge management? Which business models are needed to best realize each stakeholder's value proposition? And what is the resulting products and services? So after this step, after applying the service dominant design, after going through all those four components, the output is 3 to 5 business models that will be selected and implemented for the company. So now we will go to the example. So the example for this chapter is industrial water jet cutting machine for a small mechanical engineering company. So this example is to demonstrate the benefits of using service dominant design in practice. It is a simplified digital transformation for a small mechanical engineering company, and its main product line are industrial water jet cutters, for which the company is also providing maintenance service. So, if you don't know, water jet cutting is an erosive process that uses high pressure water to cut through various materials to create 2D shapes such as foam and rubber gaskets, and to cut products such as food, textiles, etc. So in the first step, Uh, goods are distribution mechanisms of service provision. Industrial water jet cutter is purchased because it provides high precision cutting services for various materials and shapes. So the first step is constructing a service-oriented corporate identity and philosophy. So in this way, the company can redefine its overall process to become a digital service provider of high-value industrial cutting solutions. So the goal is to maximize the customer's experience, value, and context when receiving the service by using the technological capabilities, the stakeholder network effects, and identified contextual knowledge and high order needed. So for the next step is stakeholder network component. So this is the resulting set of the stakeholders to interact with. So each stakeholder, manufacturing company, university, government, basic materials supplier, so each of them are assigned to at most two markets of six market models. So as you can see here, manufacturing company is assigned to customers and referrals, the university alliance and recruitments, and so on. So each of them has their own set of pains and gains to potentially address by that will be potentially addressed by value propositions. So customer and non-customer stakeholders are considered. All stakeholders would be identified, classified, and evaluated regarding their interrelationship. So the goal here is to get an in-depth understanding of the current ecosystem state. So the third step is value proposition. The definition of the overall value proposition aligned to the company's purpose. So, individually tailored value propositions can be defined for each relevant stakeholder, visualized using the value maps of the value proposition canvas. This figure presented here shows the customer profile on the right and one corresponding value map that results from the value proposition component of the service dominant design on the left for the manufacturing company stakeholder. So this includes the definition of the overall value proposition aligned to the company purpose, as well as the definition of guidelines and criteria all value propositions must adhere to. So for the last step, so this is the business model. The business model component is applied to define the suitable business models for each value proposition. So this describes a concise approach of what needs to be done in order to best address an opportunity for value co-creation based on the identified gain, creators, and pain relievers. So this is the resulting business model targeting the manufacturing company stakeholder. So all stakeholder pains and gains are in some way addressed, resulting in a potentially high value in context for the parties involved. So based on this knowledge and based on the explicit stakeholder feedback, this model can be iteratively improved to enhance the experience, value, and context, which directly corresponds to the company's overall goal of becoming a digital service provider of high value industrial cutting solutions. So, in conclusion, service dominant design enables companies to tackle the need to become digitalization progressively in reasonable steps with smaller investment risks. So, this is achieved by coming up with business models that best address the potential for value co creation with the provided methodology. If we think about a service dominant transformation first and then extend our architecture to comply with the requirements of our service ecosystem, we can best leverage and benefit from today's predominant logic of economics exchange.